One Saturday morning, Robert woke up with a mission: the new Lego Star Wars set. He had just graduated from kindergarten, and his parents promised him a trip to Toys R Us. Like most 5-year-olds, on the way to get new toys, Robert knew exactly what he wanted out of his morning, so he talked about it nonstop. When he woke up, at breakfast, when he walked to the car, sitting in his car seat, it was the only thing coming out of his mouth. Despite Robert's clear vision for his morning, his mom was a working mom, so she had some errands to run. So even though Robert got in the car to go to Toys R Us, they ended up at the bank. Robert was confused, and he asked his mom, "What are we doing here?" So she quickly replied, "Well, I need money to pay for the toy," which he thought made sense, so he accepted it, and he went back to focusing on his Lego set. But next, they went to the dry cleaner. And that didn't make any sense to Robert. The money, the bank, okay, cool. Dry cleaner, no. So his mom tried to placate him, handed him a lollipop, told him, "We'll get to the toy store," and he accepted it, but he was determined to get to his big goal. And he decided to announce his ultimate destination, that Star Wars Lego set, to everyone he saw, hoping that he could will it, or at least speak it, into being, no matter where his mom brought him. The same pattern continued a few more times. The hardware store, the pharmacy, the bakery, but they finally got to the toy store. Robert immediately ran inside, found his prized Lego set, and called to his mom, "I'm so glad we finally got to the toy store. This was the only thing I had planned today." As his mom drove away from the toy store with her now happy son with his Lego set in the back seat, it dawned on her that in some ways, maybe she should be a little bit more like her 5-year-old son. From the moment he woke up, Robert had a goal: get a Lego set. No matter what happened, he never let that goal out of his mind. Even though his journey took a number of unexpected twists and turns, the bank, the dry cleaner, the hardware store, he never let his sight get in the way of his vision. No matter what he saw around him, no matter how many things did not go as he had planned, he remained focused on his ultimate goal, and eventually, with persistence, he was able to achieve it. This story has stuck with me since I first heard it from Robert's mom at my Teach for America graduation nearly 4 years ago. Its message is one that I believe is important for all of us as current and rising Jewish professionals to keep in mind on a daily basis. In the midst of the daily grind, it can be hard to remain focused on the underlying vision motivating the work that we all seek to do for the Jewish community. Both as individuals and as leaders of organizations and congregations, tasks like email, meetings, and phone messages are going to inevitably get in the way of our ability to strategic plan and vision set. These tasks are important and necessary, but if we focus solely on them without remembering why we're doing them in the first place, we risk getting lost, led astray, and burnt out. If we want to be successful and effective, we need to regularly and consistently reconnect ourselves to the bigger picture of our calls to Jewish communal service. Today, in keeping with the theme of remaining connected to ultimate vision and not getting overwhelmed in detail, let's focus on the big picture of what exactly is happening in Truma. Truma is emblematic of our tendency to have sight overpower vision. In this parsha, we're given a multitude of extremely detailed instructions about how to create the Mishkan, the Holy Tabernacle. Nothing is left up to the imagination. The gold, the goat's hair, the acacia wood, the lapis lazuli, everything is described in 96 verses of detail. The Torah gives us such vivid and specific descriptions of the Mishkan that for centuries, scholars and artists have been able to recreate intricate images of it based solely on this description from Truma. Truma has some wisdom to offer as we take on this challenge of balancing sight and vision. The parsha opens with a clear instruction from God. Daber el b'nei Yisrael, vayikhu li truma me'et kol ish asher yidvenu libo tikhu et trumati. Speak to the children of Israel and have them take an offering for me. From every person whose heart moves him or her to act, you shall take my offering. Several verses later, the ultimate purpose of these offerings is revealed, stating, Va'asu li mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham. and you shall make me a sanctuary, and I will dwell in your midst. Despite the many details that follow these verses, at its core, Truma is about God outlining a plan for how we can build a space for God to dwell among us. Yes, all of the details and instructions are intended to help move the Israelites towards this goal, but they're not the main point of the portion. Focusing solely on these details puts us in danger of losing sight of Truma's ultimate vision, the importance of creating holy space in our communities. Losing sight of vision is not a problem unique to individuals. It's also something that happens in entire organizations. In the nonprofit world, letting your sight get in the way of your vision is known as mission drift. Mission drift describes situations where institutions find themselves having moved away from their original missions. Now, this is, of course, not always a bad thing. Sometimes it's necessary for organizations to pivot and reinvent themselves a little bit. However, more often than not, this phenomenon appears when leaders get so bogged down in the daily grind that they forget what it is they are working towards and gradually veer away from their big picture missions. It's a phenomenon that's really common and damaging in organizations. We can all remember when Starbucks tried to sell CDs and board games instead of just coffee and tea. And we all know about Birthright trying to sponsor 20s and 30s dinners instead of just trips to Israel. Mission drift is far more common than we realize, and it's something that the Jewish community is just as prone to as the rest of the world. In some subtle ways, however, our tradition has urged us to not allow our sight to get in the way of our vision, though sometimes these messages themselves can ironically fall victim to the very trap that they're trying to avoid. The Kabbalist, Rabbi Isaac Luria, recommended that we begin services with the following kavanah. Hareini mekabel alai mitzvat aseh, shel ve'ahavta l'ra'echa kamocha. I hereby accept the positive commandment, love your neighbor as yourself. Luria designed this kavanah to keep us from losing sight of the work we as Jews are trying to do in the world, even as we are asked to complete 3 sets of very detailed routinized prayers every day. According to Luria, every action, every day, had to contribute to the master plan of getting closer to God, and centering yourself with this kavanah before prayer was a way to reconnect to this divine mission. Despite his ambitious goal, however, this intention-setting practice has largely been lost from modern liturgy. The only mainstream siddur of any denomination that this kavanah still appears in is Siddur Sim Shalom, where it's included just before Nisim B'chol Yom. It's quite ironic that the words of Luria's intention-setting kavanah got lost in the very sea of liturgy that it was trying to imbue meaning in. Similarly, you can also argue that the rabbis tried to reconnect us with the ultimate Jewish vision of getting closer to God by creating the practice of reciting 100 blessings a day. Originating in Tractate Menachot, the sages created this practice using wordplay on a verse from Deuteronomy, which read, "What, or ma, does God ask of you?" To answer this question, the sages used wordplay on that ma, turning it into mea, or 100, explaining that the verse clearly conveys that God requires each of us to recite 100 blessings a day. When researching this 100 blessings practice, I was really shocked to find how many sources focused exclusively on how to fit those 100 blessings into your day, and how few of them ever even ask the question of why are we commanded to say these blessings in the first place. From a modern perspective, the purpose of this practice is not actually the blessings themselves per se, but rather it is to use these blessings to help people connect to the divine in the world and develop a sense of gratitude in their lives. Intended as a plan to build space for holy encounter, just like the Mishkan, and yet most engagement with this practice falls into the trap of only counting and not envisioning. As is too often the case, sight overpowers vision, and the rabbi's well-intentioned message gets lost in the details. And yet, as each of these different examples of intention gone astray have shown us, this notion of not letting your sight get in the way of your vision is incredibly complicated and difficult to achieve. Though it's easy for us to identify with Robert and his zeal to get that Lego set, in reality, most of us are more like his mom, struggling to see the end goal in the midst of all the details. It's easy to maintain vision when your only job is to go to the toy store, but it's a lot harder when you're managing the daily operations of an entire organization or congregation. So, how can we keep Robert's laser focus on mission while still giving attention and credence to all of the peripheral concerns we see along the way? It's a never-ending process, and it requires the intention setting that Luria and the rabbis thought to imbue in us, reminding ourselves of why we're here at every turn. We must not only have a clear vision for our work, but we must also find a way to hold that vision in front of us every single day. It must become the lens through which we focus our work so that we can remind ourselves how even the smallest of details or emails relate back to why we're doing this work in the first place.